Hi, this is a special Christmas treat. Think of it as a selection box at Christmas where you get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you're going to have now some of my highlights from the year in nice little bite-sized bits, glances down at script. James Acaster, Katherine Parkinson, Stewart Lee, Joe Brand, Morgana Robinson, and Steve Coogan. This is a lovely little collection of little bits of them. Merry Christmas.
I don't really want to be here, if I'm honest.
I'm a jelly baby.
We had dog collars on as well.
Failed English language twice?
No expression whatsoever.
First up, James Acaster, one of the best comedians of his generation. I wanted to talk about it, but all he wanted to do was try and muscle in on my lunch. Where do you stand? Here's a social awkward thing. Yeah. I don't know how long we've done. I want to look at my watch, but I'm really afraid of offending you because I've been with people when they look at the watch and...
It depends how much you're enjoying the chat.
Listen, I'm loving the chat.
You know.
But my wife is arriving at 1 o'clock. We're having lunch here with friends.
I'm not getting invited to that for my birthday. Can't help but notice.
I'd love if you wanted. You're welcome to join us, but...
I will.
You will, seriously?
Yeah, I haven't eaten today.
Well, this is good. I think it's probably I'm getting it. We've talked a lot.
Yeah.
I've not thought about the time.
Not even got into the start of my career. I'm smelling a rebooking.
Would you come back?
Of course, this is like part one of... At the rate we're going, 10.
I could, James, honestly, you know how I feel about you. I could talk to you forever.
Yes. You can have a meal with me with your wife.
I could talk to you forever.
Yes.
You know, I think meals with wives are special things, aren't they?
But birthday. My birthday recently, and I haven't eaten today.
Yeah.
I'm in the venue anyway.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going out of my way.
I can't say we've got to get to the restaurant because it is literally over there.
Coming here. Said I would be welcome earlier.
Yeah, I did. That's true. Well, listen, I think I have no choice but to say to you, would you like to join us for lunch?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. It's been a pleasure talking to you. The pleasure is slightly towards the end. It's become less intense, but nonetheless, still. Well, we're going to hold something back for lunch.
Yeah. So it's going to go like that.
Next up, one of my favourites, Morgana Robinson. Met her once or twice before. She's fantastic. After this interview, I became her biggest fan. Impressions, just a whole great way of doing it. Shut up, Morgana Robinson.
Honestly, I had about 2 years where anyone I met, they would say, God, you look just like Fern Cotton. I was like, oh. So then I just did it naturally. I was like, just sort of went home and studied her. And basically, it was actually turned out to be pretty brilliant. So Radio Uno. It was like, just totally natural, mate. And I thought, could be on something here, basically. And then I did the Morgana show, and she's in that. And then it went down blimmin' well.
Because, there's a physical resemblance, right?
Yeah.
But you've got to learn her vocabulary. You've got to know that she says...
Just learn the song. That's what I call it. It's a song, isn't it?
Yes. So the melody of the song, but also the lyrics of the song. So Bloomin' would be an example. Radio Uno, all these little things.
And then I'm obsessed with where the mouth is in the tongue. Is that what,
where the tongue is in the mouth, I would say.
That's it.
Yeah.
That way round.
Yeah.
I get obsessed.
Be odd otherwise,
So, Fern, she's very sibilancy. Like, she's quite essy, it's all quite, the tongue's in the front of the mouth, mate, and sort of leans on the front of her syllables. Like, really enjoys them. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like... If I were to do like Cheryl Cole, for example, it's like there's a tiny bit of air between her teeth and her cheeks.
There's a real softness then.
It's so chocolatey.
I could see that in your mouth. It became a bit softer.
Yeah, and it's just it's all on the mania as well because it's been quite a hard time. It's like because the press are always after us and that, and I've had a couple of horrible shit things happen this week, and it's just been quite. I don't know. I don't really want to be here, if I'm honest. I'd rather be at home in me trackies.
That's fantastic.
I know. She's my favourite.
Is she?
No, I can't believe I've just said that. I can't say that. She's my favourite.
Natalie Cassidy.
It's not me. I'd say I'll always will be. You do it. You do the press and my pressure.
What you do, pressure by pressure.
So,
All right, so
do you want to do the rest of the show, like?
what's the rest of the show like?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah, all right, yeah. I'd quite like to.
It's a little bit more like,
It's a little bit.
dear.
Oh, dear.
Oh,
yeah.
dear.
Cool.
Always like the sort of like chirpy Victorian sort of, I don't know, like
I
a
saw a
housekeeper. It's
clip-
all going to be all right. Bless her, she lost her dad last year, and they were very, very close. And they had this beautiful show called, it's called Becoming Mum. And that, if anyone cares, is where I got the eye roll from.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because she's teasing her dad about the tie he's wearing.
Yeah.
And she's like, did you just pick that one out yourself, Dad? And I was like, I'm having that. But she's so glorious to watch.
As well as bringing you big names, I also like to go looking around for those who are either new or, like our next guest, they've been around for a long time, but it just hasn't worked. His name, Steve Coogan.
How did you do O-level wise?
Well, I got 6, and I failed my English language twice.
Failed English language twice?
Yeah, O-level.
How the hell did you fail English language twice?
I don't know. I mean, it's really it was very embarrassing at the time. I felt like I was like, what they used to be called remedial. I mean, I failed it twice. I got an E and D, then a B in O-level English language, which is pretty much about just stringing a sentence together. I think
that's astonishing.
And I got an Oscar nomination for Best Screenplay sometime later. I was always instinctive, and my intellect followed later.
Have you been self-taught since then? Have you sort of slightly played catch-up? Because you've always struck me as somebody who knows quite a bit about quite a lot.
Well, therein lies the problem, isn't it? Like a magpie. I'm like a magpie. Sort of, pick up. I mean, from my father, I got the appetite for knowledge and really wanting to learn to value the craft of what I do and to start to spot patterns and learn from other people.
But you've stayed incredibly focused. The obvious example is the quality of Partridge, which has just stayed, given the quantity of stuff that you've done as Alan, that's amazing. But then going after these, you've got a very stubborn determination. And I remember you telling me that before you did Philomena, one of the spurs for that was not getting the lead in an ITV drama. And you were rather indignant about that.
Interesting, no one's actually asked me about that before. I was fucking furious, I'm sorry. Charles Sturridge was directing a drama for ITV. He wanted me to play the lead. It was a doppelganger story. And he said, I really think you're just right for this, Steve. And I said, thanks for having me. And he said, would you come on and just do a little screen testing, more for just to show them, demonstrate that you can do? I was like, yeah, whatever you want, I'll do it. I was in New York. I went along, did the audition. He then said, I'm sorry, they don't want you, because he said, I think they were hoping that you'd show, that the screen test would show your weaknesses, but you did everything you were supposed to do. And then they just said, we just don't want him because of who we think he is. We can't associate him with just acting. It just seems wrong. We see he's Alan Partridge. We just want an actor. And their cast was very good actor, Matthew Rhys, who's fantastic, but it stung me at the time. And he said, I've never encountered this before, but I was spitting blood about that at the time. I'm also very angry about social issues and war and stuff like that, just to put it in context.
And bad service in restaurants.
And bad service in restaurants, thank you.
He'll go far. Next, and another one of my favourites, I said Morgana was one of my favourites. This implies that Steve wasn't one of my favourites, but I know him really well. But Stewart Lee, fantastic. And I interviewed him just after having watched his 2 specials, which is so impressive. And it became the most controversial one we've ever done because of his comments about a certain show. If a certain person on that certain show is watching, it was nothing to do with me. It was all him.
I just think at the moment there's a lot of just real shit stuff being said about people that are fairly vulnerable in stadiums by billionaires.
You said earlier the Stewart Lee character. A lot of people are interested in this element of you. A lot of my fellow comedians, Noel Fielding,
Greg Davis, John Cleese, Tim Vine. I mean, different people. They get Ricky Gervais. They get mentioned, sometimes less than flatteringly. To what extent is that your feeling about them,
Okay, well,
or is it a character
I
feeling?
absolutely love Noel Fielding. I think he's brilliant, and I don't think.
Good.
I think in the show, the thing I'm saying about him, it's me. The character of me thinks is saying what he does is rubbish, and then tries to do it and can't. So has to just dismiss it out of hand.
Yeah.
I think Tim Vine is brilliant, and I went to see Tim Vine, and I think what I say in the show is I'm like Tim Vine on amphetamines or something. It's not a criticism of Tim Vine.
No,
Obviously, John Cleese, without John Cleese, none of us have a career. He's part of a generation that changed everything, and you'll never be able to take Fawlty Towers or Monty Python away. But I do think that he's becoming increasingly one of these reactionary old men complaining about young people, and that's what I'm talking about in the show. I think The Office is brilliant. I think Ricky's comedy drama work is of diminishing returns to the point where it's now abysmal. I think it must be very sad if you're teaching drama or creative writing. How can you make a case for the things that make drama and creative writing good when Afterlife is a success? Because your kids could just go, but none of those things happen in this, and yet millions of people watch it. I think it's one of the worst things that's ever been made by a human.
But I read that you were a big influence.
I know, yeah, well, it's awful.
And
it's
he's said as much.
Well, I don't suppose Robert Oppenheimer felt great about having created the atomic bomb. He sort of,
and that's the most obvious comparison. Playing Uncle Bryn in Gavin and Stacey, there was never any need for an intimacy coordinator, but that's what Katherine Parkinson had to get to grips with. There's no joke there on one of her most recent productions. Listen to this.
I have just been in Australia filming something.
What were you filming there?
And we loved it there. I filmed a really rude show, which I'm pleased you haven't seen because I think you'd be blushing looking at me across the microphone, called Spreadsheet, which is spreadsheet.
There's rather unpleasant connotations with the word spread if you say it's rude.
So it's just me having sex with lots of Australian men.
Is that right? Did you have an intimacy coordinator?
Oh my gosh, I lived with the intimacy coordinator, yes.
Tell the listener / viewer what they do.
I actually sort of think, God, how awful that we didn't have it before. It can be a slightly earnest process, which can clash if you're doing, obviously the sex scenes I have done have been with a comedic thrust.
That's right, comedic. So that's different. But if it's it's not comedic,
like Normal People, which I'm sure, I watched that and was moved to tears by the sex scenes. They were so beautifully done, and I think for something like that, it's like absolutely integral. I also think, with hindsight, things like you would sort of have awkward sort of romantic or whatever sex scenes with actors, and there were no rules. I remember sort of it being suggested I rehearse something with an actor on our own. I think it's wonderful it's happened now. I think a lot of actresses of my generation feel slightly sad it didn't happen before, because you suddenly see things in the context of the time and go, God, I felt really vulnerable then, and I was vulnerable. But for me now, as a, knocking on a bit actress doing... I'm not. But, at 45 to have these...
45 is ludicrous.
So this brilliant woman I had in Australia who wasn't sort of... she had a good sense of humour and everything else, but we didn't manage to do the read-through before we did the scenes. And you stand opposite somebody and you go, hello, my name is Katherine. He says, hello, my name is Robin. And they say, is there anything you're uncomfortable with today? Any part of your body you don't want to be touched? And I sort of went, no. And then, of course, I felt like a slag. No, I'm all good. Go ahead.
And did the actor look at you and go, steady on?
They were often younger than me as well, so I felt like, anyway.
He said, no, I'm just happy to be here.
No, I'm just happy to
I'm
to
in
be
Australia.
Involved.
I'm working. And look at him.
Go for it, babe. Go for it.
So
then they'd sort of go, hi, I'm Robin. I'm touching your shoulder, Katherine. And you have to keep eye contact. Oddly for me, it felt much more intimate, almost more personal than before, where you just kind of, meet somebody. And I remember years ago playing a vicar with Alexander Armstrong. We barely even said hello, and you just sort of.
Oh, what did you have to do with Xander? That sounds horrific. No woman should have to.
It stayed with me.
So now when you hear him on Classic FM, ushering in some Vivaldi, does it bring it all back?
It does. It does.
PTSD.
We had dog collars on as well. It's just, it's not a nice. And it'll flash before me on my deathbed, no doubt. And for him, I'm sure.
Last of all, in our Christmas selection box is Jo Brand, who told us how her time spent at a mental health crisis clinic turned out to be a big help when it came to dealing with hecklers.
And so I just stood there and did what I thought were funny jokes. But I think the big problem for me was always the delivery. I was described at my first Edinburgh as speaking as if I was reading the football results, because I had a very monotone delivery, no expression whatsoever. And that was all to do with stage fright plus lack of skill.
You hadn't studied comedians. You hadn't studied comedy. You came from medicine, from psychiatric nursing?
That's right. Yes, I hadn't studied comedians. I tend to think, in a very broad sense, that's because I'm female. And I don't think women have that gene that allows them to absolutely get to the bottom of and pick up information about individual comedians, how long they worked for, what they do, what their background is. No.
I find that a bit sexist. You're saying that just because I'm a man.
Let me just tell you, Rob, you can't be sexist if you're a woman, because let me just tell you, I've always believed
explain
this.
it to me.
The ism is about power, and as things stand at the moment, men still have more power than women.
Jo Brand speaking earlier today in London. I studied comedians.
Did you? I bet you did. You strike me as that sort of person.
Thinks. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing, I think. I mean, I kind of feel bad that I didn't, in a way, because maybe I would have learnt more. I actually didn't have a plan. I just wanted to see if I could make people laugh, people that I didn't know.
So psychiatric nurse by day,
yeah,
comedian by night.
Yes.
How did that go?
Well,
evidently very well.
All right. Obviously, it didn't start very well because I took no advice whatsoever. So my first few gigs, open spots, were terrible. I am blessed with, particularly from having been like a mental health nurse, I suppose, I'm blessed with not really caring or not having to care about the sorts of things that people said to me, because I ended up running a 24-hour emergency clinic where people were in a really high state of disturbance and would have to be to come into a place like that, many times brought by the police. They didn't want to be there. I was the figurehead who ran the place. So I was the one that got all the abuse.
Are we talking about the audiences now or the 24-hour clinic?
Well, we're talking about the clinic now, but
that was meant to be a joke. It didn't land. I was hoping for, you see, you said they didn't want to be there. I was the figurehead. I thought, here's an opportunity for a joke. Was that the audience or the clinic? You took it entirely at face value.
I did.
No, Rob, that was the clinic.
I do that face value thing a bit.
There you go. What a year it's been on Brydon. And we've spoken to 40 guests this year, way up on the previous year. Next year, we may even do 41. Thanks for your support. If you've been coming back each week and watching, I very rarely ask people to subscribe, so I'm not going to ask it now, but you know I'm thinking it. Merry Christmas.